we've been just having a very interesting conversation here, and I've thought about something I think is quite profound, and that is, I speak about capitalism and socialism quite a lot, and how they feed each other, how they're both essentially flawed. And I'm just throwing this one out here. Socialism can only work if all the participants in it are hard-working capitalists, right? And capitalism could only ever work. We've never had socialism or capitalism. I've said many times, no country has ever had it, right? The closest we ever had was the Carnegie times, 1800s, 1900s in America, start of the 1900s, end of the 1800s in America, right? It's probably the closest we've ever come to capitalism in the world, and it still wasn't capitalism because it wasn't free market, right? What's his name again? Marx actually wrote a book about this, and it's called Capitalism. It's got extra words, but it starts with the words capitalism, wrote by Karl Marx. Very good book, and he explains some of this anyway. But because he was actually, he didn't adore, but he looked up to capitalism. He came up with socialism and thought that no, we weren't ready for it and wouldn't be for a long time. But you still get these anti-socialists who say certain things about him. You still get these anti-capitalists who don't understand we don't even have capitalism. Both sides are idiots. But anyway, what I was going to say is that socialism will only work well when you have hardworking capitalists. Everyone has to be hardworking capitalists. If not, if you have the lazy kind of socialist-minded, naturally socially minded person, the society has a race to the bottom. When you have equality of outcome instead of equality of opportunity, what that creates is the people who are the hardest working get to the stage where, well, they start off being used, being exploited, then they end up waking up to that because by default they're generally smarter than the person who's a lazy bastard, right? So what ends up happening is they just start, why should I bother? Why am I putting myself through all this stress? Sometimes they'll work themselves like a slave horse. Sometimes they won't. And then you end up having, this is why countries that try to go for socialism tend to not succeed very well. Not always. Usually it's because of embargoes and stuff like that. But, because they can obviously still succeed because some people, doesn't matter if they're getting exploited, they'll still allow themselves to be exploited their whole lives, and that country will still output things, right? I would actually say more of the downside of socialism is because of the embargo situation and the unlevel playing field. And embargoes, of course, you can't have anything more uncapitalist, and yet these so-called capitalist countries, that's how they behave, is they try to gain control through the use of coercion. So then people have no choice. It's hardly free market. So both sides are absolute hypocrites. Both sides have never really existed in the pure form, but both sides can never work unless you actually tribalize society into hardworking people. And the socialists would end up having to just be a bunch of people who weren't striving to be the best, or didn't mind giving their service, didn't mind working like a slave while they watched those around them not working like a slave and having the exact same reward as them. There are people like that. It's pretty rare. There's another thing as well when it comes to ability, God-given gifts, whatever you want to call it, versus effort. Because I personally, I don't agree with, for example, intellectual property rights. The reason for that is that I think we draw most of our ideas from the ether, just from around us. I think the recycled ideas, I think they're probably even ideas from previous civilizations. For all we know, that's how it works. But even if they're not, you're born with what you're born with. Effort's different. You have to apply effort. And that's why I think that the thing that should really result in a socialist society, that is, the thing that should really result in payment more than your fellow man, is how much effort you apply. That can be mental effort, physical effort, whatever. At the moment, we're living in a world where the people who apply the most effort mentally, let's say, for example, some of the best ideas in business, they come from the junior associate. The idea gets stolen from a senior manager during one of the board meetings. They know, oh, this is a smart young guy, let's start harvesting his ideas. Why? Because I was that guy when I was younger, right? My ideas constantly being harvested, and then my immediate boss telling me, oh, Craig, just put up with it, man, this is just how it works. Like, okay, but you think they just give a like a slight bit of a shout out to so I could jump off the bottom rung of my career path, rather than just. And what you'll actually find is that the best people, and some of the best people who've worked for me, who I've given promotions almost immediately as when I worked out who they were and what their lot had been in life, is they don't get given promotions because the managers who feel they own them don't want them to progress. They don't want to lose that person who's a doer, and that holds them back in life. And then what you end up getting is the useless fucks end up getting up the ziggurat lickety split. Promoted to get rid of them, but also it's promoted to fill gaps or whatever it might be. It might be a minority gap of some kind, or a perceived minority gap, because like for example, female and men is not really, it's not really a female minority, is it? And same as the white, black, brown. There's no such thing as minorities really. We're all majorities in our own area. It just depends where you are geographically. So so socialism will only work if you actually have hardworking capitalists. Why? Because you're working hard as a team. You're doing your best. You're putting in your best effort because you're a hard worker. You can't just sit there and be a lazy ass and not go to work for a year if you're a capitalist-minded person, right? So you imagine a socialist society. That's what it takes, and this is effectively social responsibility. And this is probably why Karl Marx said that the world's not ready for it yet, for socialism. So therefore, both the capitalist-minded tribalist idiots and the socialist-minded tribalist idiots, the Marxist kind of ones, they're both completely wrong about their own politics and the politics of the other side, or that side, as they sometimes say. Anyway. So yeah, it actually that's why neither will work. Because when you have a lazy-minded person who is going to use who they know, not what they know, and going to pull the strings of coercion instead of actually applying effort, that's the socialist, a typical socialist mindset, or someone you will find who is pushing for socialism is generally that kind of person. Is generally the person that wants to lean on someone else rather than lifting themselves up. And the reason they really want social support is because they don't want to put in their fair share of effort, right? I'm just being honest, that's what it is. I have hardly seen any. There is socialists like that want to put in extra work, but they're not the majority. They're actually the rarity. And they are the ones in Animal Farm that get sent to the sausage farm. The what's it called, the abattoir, to get turned into sausages. That's the reality of it, right? So in the capitalist side, when you are a socialist-minded person, you're pulling the strings. So you're the Hillary Clintons of the world. You know what I mean? You're the Warren Buffetts of the world. You haven't really created anything. You found a hack. You found a loophole. Your friend got you inside information. Nancy Pelosi, for example, her giving her husband inside information, picking the correct stocks, better than BlackRock, better than all the top hedge funds in the world. Her and her husband have magically navigated the seas of trade and come out the other side smelling of roses, not one scratch on them. Gone from what a few million to 160 million, and then this year over 300 million. Just the two of them. Gets asked about it, and of course, I don't know, by a veteran reporter, a very respected veteran reporter from 60 Minutes. I was shocked that he was the guy who asked the question about her trades. Tesla buying a big multi-story building in San Francisco, and then magically the new subway stop gets built near her place, which of course doubles the value because if you're in that certain zone, that's how it works. And a plethora of things like that, just not just the stock market insider trading manipulation of the markets, but clearly benefiting from things that she has autonomy over as the Speaker of the House. So yeah, we're seeing that's someone who's socialist minded. One is she works for government. She gets parasitically paid. Governments are not. I would actually like to see a world. I think even though it might be in some ways bad to have someone who relies on, like Donald Trump doesn't take his salary. I think there's bad sides to both ways. But what I would say is that when someone makes their salary and doesn't make it from the people, then there's more chance they're going to be corrupt in some ways, right? But Nancy Pelosi is the proof, and Hillary Clinton's the proof because of the corruption they have with their funds, like in Haiti, for example, with the Clinton fund. That actually those that are parasitic of the system, it's when you lose track of who pays you, that is when the socialist-minded people become the worst to be in politics. And when a capitalist person is in control, it's when they lose track of or lose all sense of patriotism. That's where they become bad for their jobs. So I think we're always going to have capitalist and socialist-minded people. I'm a mixture of the two myself. I think a very balanced mix of the two myself, but I more see left-right politics as a total distraction to north-south politics, which is fascism and authoritarianism, which is the real scourge of the earth, against freedom, libertarianism. And so I don't even see myself as left-right, because left-right is a fluid thing, gender fluid. No, it's a politically fluid thing that you have to. Sometimes you're going to be, I've mentioned this before in another video, you're going to have to apply a conservative ideology to some arguments in your life. Like, for example, how do you want your daughter to dress? I don't know. And then you might apply a liberal one sometimes. How do I want to behave in the strip club? I don't know, something like that. You know what I mean? So just I know these are two bad examples, but just giving you examples of how that fluidity is going to be in most people's mind. And this is why when you tribalize that left and right ideologies, you end up in a scenario where you automatically get hypocrisy, because inside you're thinking, well, for this thing I want to do that, but no, I am a liberal. No, I can't do that. I can't say that obvious thing that's true because I'm on this tribe. You know, this is why you get hypocrisy, and this is why left and right, the biggest distraction is left and right, because it shouldn't be separated. The only thing to separate is what level of authoritarianism will you allow. And I would argue none, because authoritarianism needs to be flipped on its head. Those that serve us from the money that we pay them to serve us should not have any authority over us. We should have total authority over them, and that can completely change the day they decide not to do that job anymore. That's the way politics should work. So I would argue that the only thing is the South Wing is the only politics that should really matter, to ensure that you maintain total authority over your politicians, to make sure you have total self-sovereignty at all times. And any loss of that is the slope that leads to fascism eventually. It's the slow. If you look at any country, it's a slow erosion of rights to lead to a despot being in charge, like in North Korea, like everywhere. What am I talking about? Like everywhere, they're all like that. Every country is the same. Just they're. If you imagine this, it's someone gets in control of a place, like a king, a queen, or a church, or because they're all the same thing as well. They're all a control structure. The families move throughout the centuries that maintain a certain amount of wealth. Even after the French Revolution, they don't end up killing everyone. What ends up happening, some of them escape, or a certain heir lived on, and then some lawyer comes to show this child that they've got a big massive booty, and then they've got a financial manager that comes to help, and next thing you know, that family gets built up again, and they're oppressing everyone around them again. They're acting like parasites again. And this is the flow of the world. And what they end up doing is, let's say this church gets in control, so automatically they're going to be conservative, aren't they, right? That's a right wing. What do they care about? They don't really care. They're probably raping children in the back room, because we know that's fairly common in that particular industry. So and remember that every organization is a company, or every government is a company. If it's, that's what, because an organization works to create an effective baby that everyone feeds from, and then that baby grows up into a massive conglomerate, and you're still feeding from that, but what you're doing is you're shielding yourself from any liability. So all organizations, whether they're a non-profit organization, they're all about gaining capital. How many non-profit organizations do you know around the world? I know like Plunkett in New Zealand, NHS in the UK, and there's governmental organizations, non-government, NGOs and all that sort of stuff, but they all operate in the same way, to, even if they're not allowed to make a profit, to build up this big mega structure, which, okay, it may not give you shares in some ways, but it does deliver you an unfair salary sometimes, and the looking for the what's it called? There's a lot of charities I used to work around because I was working one myself. So I met some of the guys from some of these disabled service and things over in New Zealand, and we all spoke about, when I met these other IT managers from these other charities, we all spoke about the same corruption, same greed, the same just irresponsible spending. Really, and all of our CFOs and CEOs just really a gravy train of earnings. I mean, some of these people were earning more than what you get in the corporate sector and the working in the non-profit. So my point is, you can't be fooled from any organization, and they will masquerade as being left and right wing, knowing fine and well that the only goal that all of them have is power. And whether that be power in the business world, whether it be power regionally in an area, or whether it be a national power, or whether it be global power, that's all that really matters to them. So they get in power, and it's like a rung system. You start here, right? I live in a place where I'm trying to convince the people that it's good to have me around, right? Let's say I'm a king, so I've got more wealthy people around me, and I own the land all around the palace. And as time goes on, I start to get people to move onto my land because it's closer to, I don't know, the cattle that I own. And then in time, my harvesting their effort ends up allowing me to expand my land through force, through them working for me. And then next thing you know, I can start to dictate, well, I'm going to take this additional liberty away from you, so you can't walk on a Friday with a pink scarf. I don't know, whatever it might be. Then over time, these rules, laws, this is how they do it, by the way. It's all done by laws. Laws which are, if you notice now during the pandemic, are all around the world. People are calling out this. The politicians are going in and trying to pass laws under the door while people are not able to come into the office. They've got lockdowns, whatever it might be. They've got, in the case of Wales a few days ago, they had a vote on the vaccine passport. One guy couldn't get in to vote because Zoom didn't work, like the government organization using Zoom, a private company, which could actually be intentionally blocked, because given the fact that that's a globalist agenda, well, you could just as well say, right, get this guy's IP address. How are you going to get that? From the internet service provider? Quite easy. Yep. Get that IP address. Next thing, right? Start affecting his stream so it can't connect. Or back at the company, right? We've got his IP address, right? Make that. Don't drop that IP connection, but just make it so it doesn't work. Malfunction. Put some fucking error thing. Whatever it is, we don't know what the system they're using, but we know how these things can kind of work, because I have a mind that understands how things can and are get encoded in this world. Like, we know that there are algorithmic, let's say, check boxes on people when you're on a platform like YouTube, so that you get different algorithms applied. Why do we know that? Because I can copy and paste a guy who's using words that I would get banned for. I can copy and paste his comment in the comment section, paste it myself, and it gets disallowed. That means the treatment for my comment is different than the treatment for someone else's comment. That could only happen one way, So it's not about, a conspiracy theory. No, it's about being a logical human being who understands how these things work. So over time, you have the let's say the churchy guy who became in control. You then have let's say a hedonistic liberal who just wants a big fuckfest around his little island of Jamaica, because I'm just thinking, because they've got hedonism 1, 2, and 3 over there. I think we might have a 4th one by now. So he gets in control of the island. He wants a scenario where he can just stop anywhere in the street and bum someone, right? and then a few years later he wants to bum a child. That needs to get passed in law as well. So before you know it, the children start losing their rights. What happened there? A slow erosion of rights, but it's actually the other way around. A slow erosion of rights by laws that get layered to provide justification to the person who wants to remove your rights. So it's like, but hang on, that doesn't make any sense. That would mean that we started out with more rights than we have, even though we have all this Human Rights Commission and international this and that. Yeah, we actually do. Because the reality is, it was, as much as it's wrong having might is right, at least if you're allowed to smash someone across the head with a baseball bat for trying to come into your home and shoot you in the head, well, that seems like a fair exchange to me. It seems like you at least had a fighting chance. But what happens is, when we have these rights, they make us feel we've been given something. Well, we haven't, because on the other hand, you've been taken away from. You've been told that the guy that comes in and robs from you, you can't take retribution. You can't do anything about. You have to go to court for 5 years to win back the $500 that someone stole from you. You have to go to court for 5 years, cost yourself $5,000, and at the end of it, when they rule that it's correct, they don't sue back for your whole cost and your time. They sue back for that $500, and then if you can't pay for it, they give them a waive. It's okay, you're fine. How is that serving you? And it's not, is it? But that's been delivered by an ever eroding reality of your true rights. The right that an animal has to pick another bird back because the bird's invaded its nest. Imagine it's like, you can't do that. No, but it's laying eggs. I'm like, yeah, but we just have to. If you write this form and send it out to the bird lawyer, and he'll send it to the bird judge within 16 to 38 days. But all his chicks will be born by then. He's used my nest, and I can't fit my own eggs in it. This is effectively, if you could think of 1,000,001 analogies like that, and they're all just as unfair. The reason why I do that is it's the same as when you design a system. You design a system in a small amount. Let's say like a fractal. You design a system, a small system for 50 people that can scale out. Why? Because if you design the system scaled out to thousands, it's a lot harder to digest. So it's the same way when you show the ridiculousness of our system. If you show it in a more simplistic way from an analogy, you can actually say, oh, actually, no, it is the same kind of thing. Now I can understand how disgusting it is. So this is why my goal will always be to find somewhere in the world that surprisingly doesn't exist, that you don't have. I don't mean a place you can hide away from the system. That, for example, you go to Siberia, therefore the Russian system will leave you alone. I want a place where I do not have anyone having a legal claim over me that what I'm doing or not doing doesn't comply with their rules. And I find it very odd that there's nowhere in this world that's like that. Like, there are places in America, for example, there are anarchistic homestead things, whatever, out in the desert areas of these, but they say that they are anarchism, but you can they're still within the USA, or they're still within tribal lands, so you can send a tribal detective, wherever it is, right there. I'm talking about total freedom. There's no places like that. That I can tell, there's no places like that anywhere. Not even Lieberland, because it's tiny, but two, it's a bunch of kind of corporate-y, Bitcoin-y scammer guys that, because I'm going to call them out for that, because they tried to, that's all they wanted from me was 5 Bitcoin, the pieces of shit that they are. So, yeah, they're just no better than, they're not the libertarians they claim to be. They're more like, yeah, probably, you know what? Some of them claim to be anarcho-capitalists. I suppose that is a more honest description of them. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked there. I think I've spoken for too long on this topic. I've battered it about. But anyway, socialism cannot work without hardworking, capitalist-minded people. And capitalism cannot work without socially conscious, kind of socialist-minded people. And that, I'm going to leave it there. as my thought of the day.